Hi. Okay, so we've got another reading. We are going to be reading today about Odysseus. This time it is Odysseus Comes Home. When Odysseus woke up on the beach in Ithaca, he was overjoyed to be home at last. But then he began to think of all the difficulties that lay ahead. 20 years ago, he had gone away as a young man, but now he was old and worn with traveling. Would his people recognize him as their king? Was his kingdom peaceful and prosperous as he had left it? He thought about his wife Penelope. Would she have forgotten him, or would she have perhaps married a new husband, thinking that he was dead? Odysseus was right to be worried. Penelope was beset with dangers. As time went by and he did not return, the nobles of his land assumed that he was dead. Then each of them thought greedily that if he could only persuade Penelope to marry him, he would be king. No fewer than 108 ambitious suitors came to the palace to woo her and said they would not leave until she chose one of them as a husband. They were a rowdy, quarrelsome lot, and they expected Penelope to supply them with all the food and drink and entertainment that they wanted. They drank Odysseus's wine and ate his cattle and made themselves thoroughly at home all over the palace. Penelope had no one to protect her from these suitors, for her son Telemachus was only a child. She despised and feared them, yet she could not make them leave. She had no intention of marrying, for she had never lost hope that Odysseus was alive and would return one day. In the meantime, she tried to humor them by promising to choose a husband once she had finished weaving a special cloth on her loom. She managed to take 3 years over the task. Every day she worked on her weaving, and every night she secretly undid what she had woven during the day. Eventually, the suitors grew suspicious and bribed one of her maids to watch her in the night. They were furious when they learned they had been tricked. No more of this nonsense, they said. Now you must choose. Ithaca needs a king. Meanwhile, the years were passing and Telemachus was growing up. He would soon be old enough to claim the throne. The suitors realized they must get him out of the way. When Telemachus asked Penelope to let him sail to find news of his father, they saw their chance. They would waylay his ship as it returned and murder him. Odysseus, waking on the beach, knew nothing of his son's expedition or the peril he faced, but the gods looked down and knew it all. Athena had long been waiting to help. Only respect for her uncle Poseidon had prevented her from spiriting Odysseus home long ago. Now she appeared and warned him of the suitor's treachery and of Penelope's plight. Trust me, she said, and when the moment comes, I will guide your hand against your enemies. She led him to a swineherd's hut where a young man awaited him. This was Telemachus, whom she had warned to sail home by another route. He was overjoyed to learn that this stranger was his father, and Odysseus flung his arms around the handsome young man who had been a tiny boy when he left. Athena warned that the defeat of the suitors depended on Odysseus getting to the palace unrecognized and taking them by surprise. She transformed him into a withered and decrepit old man. She told him to go find out all he could about the suitors' goings on in preparation for the moment of his revenge. No one recognized the old beggar who came to the palace door, but as he crossed the threshold, there was one loving heart whom Athena's magic could not deceive. Odysseus's old hunting dog Argus, a fine young hound, when his master went away, was now too ancient to get to its feet, but he lifted his mangy head and wagged his tail to show he knew his master was back. Telemachus, pretending not to know the beggar, offered him food and shelter, as one should to a stranger in need. The suitors' reactions were very different. They were feasting in the banqueting hall. Odysseus went to each in turn to see for himself what sort of men they were. Some tossed him some scraps, but most refused to give him anything at all. Antinous, their leader and the greediest of them all, threw a footstool at him. Penelope was disgusted by their behavior. She ordered her servants to care for the beggar, telling her old maidservant, Euryclea, to bathe his feet. Euryclea had nursed Odysseus when he was a boy, and when she washed the beggar's legs and recognized a scar above his knee, she knew this was Odysseus. She was about to cry out to her mistress, but Odysseus swore her to silence. Athena had not yet given the sign for him to reveal himself. Penelope had learned of the suitors' plot to kill Telemachus and knew that they would try again. To save her son's life, she decided she must, after all, give in and marry one of them. The next day, she told them that she was prepared to marry the man who could equal a famous feat of Odysseus's. He could shoot an arrow through 12 axe rings set in a row. She had the axes lined up for the contest and produced Odysseus's ancient bow that they must use. When the suitors tried to string the bow, they found they were not strong enough even to bend it. Odysseus, in his beggar's disguise, was sitting to one side. He realized that this was the opportunity that Athena had promised him. He stretched out a hand meekly. May a poor beggar be allowed to try? The suitors roared with unkind laughter, but Telemachus silenced them. All guests shall be treated with respect, he ordered. Give the old man the bow. Then Odysseus lovingly took up the bow he had not handled for so many years. As easily as a musician stretches a new string to a lyre, he strung the mighty bow, tested the string with his right hand, and smiled to hear it ring as he plucked it. He took an arrow, fitted it into the bow, and without even rising from his stool, shot it straight through the row of 8 axe rings. Then he rose up, tall and mighty, and there was a terrified silence in the hall as the figure holding the bow became an angry king. Telemachus, he called, the time has come to give these suitors the feast they deserve. He stood across the entrance to the hall with a bow in his hands and a full quiver of arrows at his side. Detestable curs, he cried, you never thought to see me back. You hounded my wife, robbed my household, and ill-treated my people. For that, your fate is sealed, one and all. There was an uproar in the hall as he let loose a rain of arrows. The suitors tried in vain to escape, but they could not, for Odysseus blocked the doorway. Soon every one of them lay dead. Odysseus was once again in possession of the hall, the palace, and the kingdom. The only other thing to be recaptured was the heart of Penelope. She was stunned by the sudden transformation of the beggar into a king. This person was not the young husband of her memories, and she wondered if he truly was Odysseus. He understood her hesitation. I shall sleep here in the hall if you prefer, he said. Then Penelope knew how to test him. I will have the great bed brought from my room and set up in the hall for you, she said. You cannot mean that, cried Odysseus. That bed cannot be moved. I built our marriage chamber around a living olive tree whose trunk serves as a bedpost to our bed. You have not let that trunk be cut to move the bed. Then Penelope knew beyond all doubt that this was her beloved husband come home again, for none but she and Odysseus knew this secret about the bed. She threw her arms around his neck. Odysseus's homecoming was complete. I'll show you some pictures from this one. All right. So here's the first picture. It is Penelope, and this is where she's doing her weaving, and then she undoes it every night, hoping to keep the suitors waiting longer and longer so that maybe Odysseus will come home. Here is, this is Odysseus, and he is pretending to be an old beggar. He got transformed by Athena. And here is Odysseus killing all of the suitors who took over his castle and ate all his food and were mean to his wife. And that's it. Okay, I hope you liked it. And that's all I have for you today. I will see you guys again tomorrow. Bye-bye.